All right, thank you for staying with us. In Kogi State, thousands of travelers and residents of Lokoja have been stranded as the city has been overrun by heavy flooding. The Lokoja-Abuja road, which connects the north and south, has practically been cut off, thereby paralyzing economic activities, including food supply chain from the north to the south. Wide areas of the state of Kogi are underwater after the Niger and Benue rivers broke their banks. Lokoja sits at the confluence of the Niger and Benue rivers. The roughly 196 kilometers highway is one of the most critical roads in the country, being the major link between the north and south for the movement of people, goods through vehicular transportation. The Federal Road Safety Corps is also advising motorists traveling to the southwest region of the country to kindly take the Suleja-Bida-Mokwa road, while those traveling to the south-south, southeast regions are also advised to go through Nasarawa-Oweto Bridge, Adoka stop access. Well, we have joining us in the studio the Director of Programs, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, Philip Jakpor. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
It's a pleasure being here.
Right. The situation in Kogi State, we also see that reflecting in Anambra, where about over 70 persons were said to have lost their lives as a result of this flooding. As some persons were trying to rescue some people via boat or so, and they all went into the water. And even the NEMA is saying that as it stands, you cannot use boat to rescue persons. It has to be helicopter because choppers. Houses have been submerged in these waters, just like we see in Lokoja. You said you were in Lokoja in 2012 to document what had gone on. Maybe you briefly paint us a picture of what you saw at the time and what is even happening now, so we better understand the situation.
I think we have to start with the foundation of why the flood in the first place.
Right.
And we have been told that the reason why you have this level of flooding is because you have excess rains in Cameroon, majorly. The waters you see come from the Lagdo Dam.
Yes.
Now, that dam has to be opened so that water can flow, or else it will break apart. And if it breaks apart, what we see will be more catastrophic.
Right.
So that is the foundation. So, like you mentioned in the news, Lokoja is a confluence state. Yes. So it's almost like it's a bucket down there. So once you have the waters flowing, River Niger, Benue, they meet at that point. And then in 2012, we had this kind of flooding. But what we have today is worse. Because I was in Lokoja in 2012 and did some documentation. The same places that were flooded massively in 2012 are still experiencing. In fact, now it's worse.
Yes.
Because you have Adakolo, Ganaja Bridge area. As at that 2012, the flood was houses were underwater. The images I see on social media, the videos we see of flood, I still recall some of those houses, some of those same locations. But the painful thing about this is that we seem not to have learned our lessons. I was here some weeks ago and we discussed this issue. As at then, it had not started. But in the last 2 or so weeks, you have videos, amateur videos everywhere showing the level of flooding. What you see, people are using speedboats in the center of town. It's as serious as that. Hectares of land destroyed, people forced migration, and of course, look at the economic implications. Even as far as the fuel that gets to Abuja and the northern parts of the country cannot go that way. So we are all suffering from some things that should have been done. Like I mentioned, some weeks ago, when the Lagdo Dam was built in the early 80s, Nigeria was supposed to build what they call buffer dams, small dams, not big dams, to assimilate the waters once they release the waters from the dam. But unfortunately, that was not done. So we are facing the consequence of what we should have done. So
it's the failure of successive governments to address that?
Of course, that is what is happening. And we have been, your station has been doing a lot about the reporting what NEMA, the Hydrological Services Agency and NIMET have been predicting. This prediction is not just happening. We have been getting this prediction since early this year that floods are coming. People should be notified so that they relocate. We've been going, over this over and over again. But there's something that came to me yesterday. God forbid, if there's a war between Nigeria and Cameroon, we don't expect that to happen. All Cameroon needs to do is just open the dam, and half of Nigeria will be covered by flood. So there will be no shooting. They will just displace us.
They will shoot us with water.
Just water, and half of this because the flood, Taraba, Jigawa, Niger, it's coming, and it's already getting to the Niger Delta. Yes. Port Harcourt, by Anambra, what happened in Anambra? These things are avoidable if we had done what we were supposed to do.
What are we supposed to do?
We are supposed to build buffer dams. Those buffer dams, first of all, will assimilate some of these waters.
Yes.
So, of course, we are still going to have floods, but it may not be as much as this. Then for people who are suffering today, why is it that we don't have places for displaced persons? Well equipped. I say this because in 2012, I was in this same Kogi State, Lokoja precisely. I visited some haddock homes for displaced people.
Yes, I saw.
And they were just some schools. I remember one school in Adakolo area where you had about 300 families, all crammed up. I remember then 2 toilets. I did some interrogation of people, I interviewed people. 2 toilets. You have people who are physically challenged also using those places, and everywhere was a mess. Have we learned anything? Has anything changed? Nothing has changed. It is the same thing with other states of the Federation that are also assimilating these waters. So these kind of things happen every year. We hear of a hurricane in Florida, places. What they have done is that they have places where people can relocate to, even hotels. But that's not what we may be advocating for. But the same kind of structures we put up during COVID to accommodate people, why don't we have things like that so that people relocate? And then maybe after the floods, they come back. Because it has become a yearly thing. What we only have is that this year's flood is worse than anything that has... It is not yet over.
Right.
It is not yet over.
Climate change.
Climate change, which has caused unusual rains. So the flooding is not, when we link this with climate change, in our case, it is what we are supposed to do that we have not done that has aggravated the situation. So the floods are still coming.
Are we living in a time where we might see the extinction of some of our settlements? A city of such a long history like Lokoja, are we on the cusp of seeing it wiped out of the map?
Well, the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report for 2022, predicts something exactly like that. That by the year 2030, we might have even beyond, the extinction of those places, we'll have half of Africa and people displaced. So, and it's this kind of things. So the shocking thing I might also want to throw into this is that, whenever we talk of the North, we always talk of desertification. But now we are seeing something different.
It's flood.
We are having flooding in the northern part of the country. So it is, now we are being ravaged by water. It's not only in the northern part you have this, the water threatening us. People who live on the coastlines, Niger Delta, even here in Lagos, Elegushi and Co., they are also being threatened. It's not something we need to joke about, but it's like, the waters are pushing the people because we have a lot of displacement. Yes. And people up down south here are also being pushed. If care is not taken, we'll meet at the middle somewhere. And, it's going to be crisis. Yeah. So beyond what is happening today, the implication is that next year we might actually have, a food crisis. Because what you see on those videos is millions of hectares of land, cultivable land, underwater. So next year we might have food crisis and prices might rise because of that. So it's a grim situation.
Many people don't understand the implication of climate change. They just think that it's just rains or it's just drought because they feel that it's just water. But we are talking of something that can radically change the way we live.
Exactly.
And the way we eat, the way we worship, the way we go to school, and whether we live or not, the way we take care of our health and stuff like that. You know, we were speaking the other day about water policy. This is a national water
Resources bill.
Resources bill.
Yes.
And I made a joke like if you want to, if somebody has a place of worship, for instance, a water like a pond that is place of worship, and then the federal government says that no, this is our water. Are you going to suspend the gods of that water? Or what will happen to a pond, for instance, that has been seen as sacred?
Yes.
And suddenly, because of climate change, the water dries up. Where are all the marine spirits going to go? Those who are worshiping, what would they say of their marine spirits? So I'm just talking about, speculating about what all of this means to different aspects of our existence.
Yes.
That we don't know that the implication changes not only how we eat, but how we serve our God.
Exactly.
I mean, those people who always want to use water.
Ablution
and
things
all
like
of that.
Yes.
Well, they have to change.
Exactly.
They have to change their scriptures because they have to reanalyze their scriptures. So
in fact, we can escalate this.
Not only ablution, even in Christianity, people use water
holy water for blessing, baptism.
Yes.
Baptism, exactly.
Where will you baptize?
Yes, because some do baptism of immersion and they go to the rivers and you can't
some take water too that they want to pour on their head, they want to drink, they want to cook with it because it has been blessed by the pastor.
Yes. In fact, I may want to even take this a little further. Now we are seeing these images of videos going around of houses underwater. Those houses we see, once this flood subsides, these houses will almost be uninhabitable because their foundations are already eroded. Yes. And then there may also be a water crisis in that part of the country because the water bodies where people access water is already polluted. So it's bigger than what we are seeing. It is real problem we have at hand.
Now, when you look at sometime in 2010, like we were speaking behind the scene, Lagos, some part of Lagos was flooded. I recall Agility, my 12, was flooded. They had to be using canoes as well. Some part of the Ikorodu Road was flooded, such that vehicular movement was impossible. You had to take bikes at the time. What did Lagos State do differently that we are seeing the results we are seeing now? Because if Lagos State had not done what it did, perhaps part of Lagos would have been submerged.
Underwater. Exactly.
Like we see in other states. So what did Lagos State do differently that other states perhaps could learn from?
We might also want to add that Lagos is, I think, about 5 or so meters below sea level. Yeah. Below sea level. Now, the good thing about Lagos is that you have canals and, the drains were opened. And I think that is what others must learn to do. The warnings that NIMET and Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency puts out, which has been very, very effective. Yeah. The warnings is not just for us to assimilate the news and go to bed. It is to open up the drains like Lagos did, open up those channels, let water flow. And more importantly, you have what we call the buffer zones where people are not supposed to build on. Once you remove, those structures there, the water will always find its level. That is what...
That is what Shakespeare said, nature must bow to necessity.
Exactly.
So you should do
open up the
bow. Yes.
The warnings from NIMET is not just for assimilation. Something should be done. Most of those states we are talking about, they don't even have shelters for people. Look at what happened in Anambra State. And that also goes back to agencies like NEMA and their state counterparts. I think I read something about NEMA saying that the Nigerian Navy and the Air Force should join hands with them, to rescue people because with what is happening, boats might not be able to do the job. Yes. I agree with them. But at this point, with what they also know is happening, they should have choppers Because the floods are like the apocalyptic type of floods, like what we read with the Noah story.
Yeah.
So once the flooding has gone beyond roof level, you need choppers. That's what we see happen in other parts of the world. You need choppers to,
Lift people.
pluck people from their houses. Some people on top of their roofs. You need choppers. So it is not now we should be talking about it that, oh, the Navy and Air Force should. These are things that should have been on ground. And then, like I mentioned, the shelter so that on high ground, so that people can move there. Some of these people, like we discussed the last time, culturally they live by the waters, the Jaw people, the Shekiri people, Ilaje people. It's normal, but we can help ourselves by providing those shelters so that it is seen that government has done something, so they can easily move to those places without causing the kind of crisis we have today.
Did not leave their houses. Were drowned in their houses because they didn't know where else to go.
There is nowhere else for them to go because it has not been provided. And it should. It should be provided. That's the responsibility of government. Even in the US, where we have the hurricanes happening.
I don't know how many state governments have ministries of environment in this country or have water policy in this country. Because I think when we do national budget or annual budgets for states, we think about some of the corporates, education, and so on. But it looks like when we are having an education policy, it has to have an environment component. When we are having a food or agriculture policy, it must have a water component. Whether it's a technology policy, it will have a water component. I think it is getting to that stage now where the environment has become front and center of everything we do. Yes. How many? Because I understand that there have been times when the state governors have been in meetings in this country to even learn from Lagos, but it doesn't seem like they have actually imbibed the significance of trying to learn what Lagos has done and replicate it. Look at a place like Jigawa, where people have died because of flood. It is not only there, it's across the country.
Kogi, people are dying.
Look at Kogi, look at what's going on in Kogi. Lokoja's story reminds one of what happened recently in Pakistan.
Yes.
Where the whole place was flooded and people just died, and places where people lived have become water. So the point is that if we don't revolutionize our attitude to water, water will revolutionize our attitude to life. We have to wait. Water will not wait for us. So we have to go on. Fela said, water.
You not get enemy. Exactly.
But Fela, we have to sing another song now.
Well, I think that song is very, very, very apt. But in this case, I want to say that if we do what we are supposed to do, and I pray we don't have, this is already a disaster. I pray we don't have something worse than this for us to wake up.
Does it seem like we are taking the necessary step to ensure that we don't have something?
I don't think worse. I see anything that points to that.
It's a national emergency. They have not declared national state of emergency.
It's a national emergency. It's going to affect, already it has affected fuel supply in the north. You don't need, this is terrorism.
Eco-terrorism.
Yes. Because natural when you cannot get fuel, and like I mentioned earlier, we pray we don't have a crisis with Cameroon. All they need to do is open their dam. They will sack this country. So we should wake up and do what should be done. When that dam was built, what were we supposed to do? Have we done it? That's what the Minister of Water Resources and Minister of Works should be doing. Rather than talk of a national water resources bill that seeks to take people's water away from them.
And then we have water, and then it is an opportunity actually for us to use this water as benefits.
Exactly.
But it is destroying us. We can store water, we can use it for electricity,
irrigation.
We can use it for agriculture, we can use all of it, and we're just looking at it to defeat us when we can use it as resource.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
But what's the level of engagement with NGOs like yours, with government, addressing matters like this?
We've been raising the alarm. It didn't start today. It actually started in 2012. when we had that catastrophic flooding caused by the same thing, where 23 out of the 36 states were flooded, but here it's going to be 27.
Yes.
So what else can one do? Even your program is to wake government up to their responsibility. Are they waking up? And we cannot stop talking because this is affecting our people, it's affecting our lives. When there's hunger next year, we have no one to blame but ourselves. This is the situation.
What can the state government do in this regard?
Well, the state government, first of all, the floods are here already. So we expect the state-level emergency management agency, first of all, to work with their national counterpart, NEMA. I think we've even seen NEMA more active, maybe within the new space, than their state counterparts, because they are supposed to work together, first of all, evacuate people, and then we'll start planning ahead. The floods are here with us now. So what we should think of is how to evacuate people. And for those states that have not done it, start opening up the drains and real urban planning that accommodates these kind of issues. Because already we've seen that this is something every year is happening. It could only be worse some years like we have this year. So what do we do? Evacuate the drains, open up the water channels, ensure that the buffer zones are not blocked by houses, and then educate people. People also have to be educated since it has become a yearly thing. And that must be complemented with those shelters where they can relocate to. Florida and US, I always use that state as an example. You always have hurricane. It's almost like the hurricane targets Florida particularly every year. This year, I think over 100 or so people died. But you will see the intervention of the state. The state,
not only the states, even
the federal level. Yeah, President Biden was also there to, and support structures. But most of the people that died in Florida is not because they didn't have options. They just didn't want to leave their apartments, some condos and whatever they are built. So it will
there was also information gap, because there are some information from people who died who said that the information did not get to them, that they're supposed to leave
on
their environment and so on, and they died. So what is the role of information in this society where we don't have people as enlightened as a place like Florida?
Well, that's why you have agencies like the National Orientation Agency. So while NIMET and the Nigeria Geological Service Agency raising the alarm and waking NEMA and their state counterparts to action, the National Orientation Agency should also be part of this. One thing is that the National Orientation Agency has presence in virtually all the states of the Federation. Use of local languages, recruiting traditional rulers as people who can communicate their message to the people. It's a whole thing, So we just have to look at this holistically and start. It's already happening. So we should be looking at 2023, what we can also do. Because, like I mentioned, the IPCC report this year is that these kind of incidences is going to increase.
So what should we do ahead of 2023, where we are having an increment?
We have to start raising the...
Should we build buffer dams?
The buffer dams that we're supposed to build, I think we should start advocating or heightening the advocacy for our government to do just that. It's not big dams. The reason why big dams are not recommended these days is because once there's a breach, the catastrophe is worse. So small, and that's what was recommended when the Lagdo Dam was built. That since Nigeria is, the low-lying plains, we should build those buffer dams to assimilate the water so that the effect is not going to be so much on, communities that are, by the Niger and river. And if you look at the map of Nigeria, once the Lokoja axis is flooded, like we have today, it's going to sneak its way until it gets to the Niger Delta. The exit point ultimately will be the Bayelsa. So you are going to have this level of flooding also in Bayelsa.
So can state governments take up that responsibility?
Of course, they have to. The unfortunate is that what you hear them talk about all the time, once you have floods that they can manage, is ecological funds. The little they can do to build shelters, what will it take? You need the federal government to build shelters?
But what are we doing with that fund? What's the essence of that fund in the first place?
No, the fund only comes in at that point where the state can no longer manage it. It's not, this is within the purview of the state.
Now we're talking about the financing. How many states actually give money to their own environmental agencies.
So that's
so
what
what
we
is
need to
their
probe.
budget? So that's the problem. That's why I say that it's also a budgetary and priority problem. Because I'm sure those state environmental agencies don't have more than probably 2 million naira, and maybe the money will be disbursed to them. When the crisis comes, it goes back to the government, state governor, and the governor will start saying, well, I don't have any money for that. Then they start scrambling for a response that will never come. Then they start saying, federal government come with ecological funds, when they should have started the groundwork about preventing this environmental disaster.
It's completely avoidable. This situation could have been managed better. So we hope we're going to learn from this. We hope.
We've been hoping since 2012. 10 years down the line, we are still here. So
what can be done differently?
Yeah.
That's it.
Now, when these things happen, it is easy for us to analyze it in terms of what went wrong. Now that things have gone wrong, the consequences are there. What about the health implications of all of this?
Oh, of course.
The diseases that we're going
diseases
to
will follow. I mentioned it earlier that by the time the waters recede,
you are going to have issues come.
Yeah, you are going to have a lot of health-related issues concerning the kind of water people will be drinking, because now the wells are are contaminated with these flood waters, the boreholes, everything. So by the time this is over, that is when it actually begins. It's unfortunate.
Another kind of
so people are only saying the waters now. When it recedes, the flood waters are poisoned everything.
We are already seeing a church collapse in Anambra, so we are going to see more collapse.
More collapse because the houses the foundations of those houses will be eroded. And then the waterborne diseases, illnesses will follow. Typhoid.
But this is not a state government issue, because we see that these things are happening across states. What of the interactions between the state governors and so on? Isn't it high time they came together and said, okay, you are Kogi, I am Anambra, we have this problem together. Why can't they have collaborations on how to come together and pool resources and ideas to help them? Because the way it is, it's not what happened in Lokoja is not a Lokoja problem. It is also an Anambra problem.
Of course.
It is also a Nigerian problem.
Yes.
It goes back and back and back and back.
Can I throw this
It's also a Cameroonian problem.
I think in 2012, when this flooding happened, a presidential committee was set up. There is some, I can't remember the sum, is it 21 billion or something? I can't remember. People also have to ask, because that committee had, I think, the governors and some private sector people.
Yes, they donated. It was Jonathan's time.
Yeah, President Jonathan's time.
What happened to the money?
What happened to the money?
But that's where your NGO comes in to follow the money, to know what was done.
We are asking questions.
Okay.
We are asking questions. And this is a Nigerian problem. And we have to speak as Nigerians. So it cannot be left to just some people.
The Lagdo Dam matter.
Hold on. Yes. Did you guys ever investigate that money?
Well, that level of investigation is not what our organization can do. We can only raise the alarm. We can only mention it that that's why I'm not very, very precise. But I know there was a presidential committee that was set up and that they raised money.
They made a lot of noise about it.
They made a lot of noise, and what has happened. So as we speak, we are not just talking to ourselves. We are talking to Nigeria. The relevant agencies that should investigate what happened with those monies should be listening to us and take it up.
How about a diplomatic solution to this Lagdo Dam matter from Cameroon? Is that an option for us as we speak?
I think it's going to be quite hard. Why? Cameroon will always take the safety and security of its people and the safety of the dam first before any diplomatic discussion. Because if there's a breach, there's a reason why you have that dam in northern Cameroon. They have issues of drought and things like that, and they need a dam to ensure agriculture continues to function.
Right.
But they will release waters just like any other dam. I think the Onion River in Ogun State, the dam was also open. So Yakute area of Lagos, you also have some level of flooding when. So it is that, and that's why big dams are not recommended. But once there's the threat that it may burst because of the level of water, they must release water.
Right. We'll have to leave the conversation here now and hope for the best from the various governments, level of government, state, federal, to addressing this matter of flooding. But we must thank you, Director of Programs, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation, Africa, Philip Jakpor, for your time on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.